Okay, so this first tip actually comes from Todd Barton. Take a drink. And I think he put this up on his YouTube page probably about 2 years ago or so. And this was actually a patch idea that he got from one of his students. It's really simple. I hadn't thought of it, and he was really excited about it in his video because he hadn't thought of it either, because it's just so simple, but pretty effective. So the pulsar, if you may or may not know, is just a down ramp, kind of like I believe that's a reverse sawtooth. So the voltage just starts high and it drops at a rate depending on what you have the rate at, and then it just pops back up again, and that's if you have it in kind of self-cycling mode, or you could trigger it with the sequencer or the keyboard. So yeah, what the cool thing is if you patch the pulsar output back into the input, kind of like in patching like with Surge, or from what I gather, because I haven't done it, but kind of giving basically an exponential curve to your pulsar. So this is what it sounds like without it, and it's just self-cycling. So I'm gonna add it, and I'm gonna turn up the CV input, and it's gonna speed up, but I'll kind of back off the rate to kind of match that. And if you're watching on video, I have a little janky oscilloscope. I'm doing my best DivKit impression right now. But yeah, you'll kind of see that it curves down instead of just a straight ramp down. So it's kind of nice about that. I think what's so great about like the envelope on the easel is you can get it to be such a short kind of pluck where, if you've got the pulsar, it just kind of, the long sustain is maybe not what you always want if you're using it for like the low pass gate, depending on how you want your Buchla bongos to sound. So it's kind of nice having this like more delicate pluck, I guess. It brings down the overall voltage depending on how high you have it turned up. Like I'm going to turn it up all the way, and I think it basically cuts it maybe 2/3 down, and there's but yeah, it's kind of nice to have a little bit of more control over that. So yeah, you don't have to do it in self-cycling. What's kind of cool too is if you have it in keyboard mode, you can use that. Oh, sorry, there we go. So you can have like attack, sustain, and you're going to be able to adjust your release a bit. So this is without it. So we've got a long release, but if you want to cut down that release, you can do that with your with the regular offset anyways. But if you just want a little bit of a tail, you kind of have a little more control over that. What is also cool that you can do is you could put this into, so you can run the pulsar into the inverter, and then put the inverter back into the pulsar, and I'll self-cycle that again. And now we have a more logarithmic effect to it. So this is just regular. I don't have it the CV turned up at all, but I'll start turning that up. It's harder to tell compared to the other one, but yeah, it does. The tail of it is more rounded, and it kind of works the other way around. So if I turn up the CV amount, the voltage stays kind of higher. It doesn't get as quiet as where the opposite, the voltage overall kind of dropped. Then you can do that with your keyboard as well. You can kind of have these weird, like it'll sustain for just a little bit and then a steep drop off. So yeah, if you want to kind of get more out of your pulsar, that's one way to do it. Okay, so in this patch, I'm going to show off a technique and a tip that will come later. Right now I'm going to talk about, I guess, as I refer to it, as envelope masking, to where I'm basically using the envelope and the sequencer together. So the sequential voltage source is going to, each one of its steps, I can program it to trigger the envelope. And basically, I also have the pitches of the sequence going into the complex oscillator. And it's setting up the envelope in a way that you're only maybe going to hear some of the notes. And then as you augment that envelope, more notes will kind of appear. So you're kind of unmasking this sequence. So right now I just have the first step switched up. And so that's going to trigger the envelope. I'll turn that up. And it's just a really short decay envelope. And if I were to then bring the attack up a bit and the decay a little bit, you're then hearing a little bit of the second note afterwards. If you're gonna, I turned up the decay a bit more, and so you're able to hear that third note. And if I were to do more, you're kind of getting that whole envelope. You're getting all four notes in there. But you can switch maybe which switch is triggering the envelope. So I've got switch number 3 up instead of number 1, and you're getting different. So I can kind of I've shortened the envelope, and so it's changed up what notes we're hearing, giving it a different feel. Okay, so then this next, I guess this is kind of comes to the tip portion of this patch is the output of the inverter. If you don't have anything plugged into the input of it, the output is just on full blast. It's just full voltage. Depending on what your easel, I'm not sure what kind of voltage is putting out on the 28C or the command, but it's about 13 volts, I believe. So it's really high. And basically whatever you plug into the input, it's mirroring that. So it's it's dropping down that output voltage from whatever input voltage you put in there. But if you put nothing in there, it's just this high voltage. So you could then add or put that into other control voltage inputs, kind of, setting it up as maybe like a kind of like a preset source. So if you don't have the 218, and if you're kind of maybe making a lengthier patch that maybe you want to switch up the rhythm of the pulsar. So like right now we have this tempo going. I could just use the output of the inverter. As I'm playing along with this song, I'll bring back the other. If I want to turn or kind of ramp up the speed of this, I could then have it preset, like set up my CV input slider up, kind of like double that speed. That's taking out the jack, and we're back to that point. So if you don't, like I said, if you don't have you could do this with the preset voltage source on the 218, or if you're using that for something else, you just don't have the inverter used for something, you can do that. You could also, if you want to change, like you want to jump octaves or something on one of the oscillators, on this low oscillator. Yeah, you can kind of pull that in and out. So, So think about, you could do this kind of masking thing. Also with this, I'll kind of go into the rhythms further, bring this down. But yeah, kind of really playing with the switches to get different rhythms with the envelope. That's so this is like switches 1, 2, and 3 up. This is just switches 1 and 3. You can switch that. I'll maybe bump up the timbre a bit. So yeah, have fun with switching the amount of stages, what stage switches are flipped up. Keep a short envelope where you can invert it and kind of have a slower attack. Get different feels. But yeah, kind of endless fun with that stuff. Okay, so right now we're going to talk about the random on the 208. A friend of mine, Charles C. Holzer, who works at Buchla USA now, he once told me, and God, I wish I remember the exact number, but I think it was 127. So there are 127 steps that comes out of each of the 4 random outputs, stepped random outputs on the easel, but they're not, every output is has different steps, and basically they're kind of not all created equal in a way. They have their own flavor to them. If you've looked at the Source of Uncertainty 266, there's in a couple of the sections, like the quantized random voltage and in the stored random voltage, you can affect kind of how the distribution is weighted differently. Like on the a stored random voltage, you can turn the knob to the left, and that means kind of all the voltage is going to be in the lower end. It's not going to kind of go from 0 volts to 10 volts. It's going to go 0 to 1 to 3 to 6 to 4, and then you can kind of move it up into the middle, and it'll be more of the middle range, and then up to high. So yeah, and actually within the 208's randoms, you kind of get a sense of the differences between them. So I'm gonna turn this up, and this is gonna go to pitch, so you can kind of hear the actual difference between the voltages. And so this is gonna be on the far right random output that's underneath the low pass gate. And I have it going at a really fast pace, so it's going to get through that 127 steps in a fairly short amount of time, so you can kind of hear its cycle. So to my ears, to this one, it kind of covers a fair amount of range. Like, it'll stay down low for a little bit, and kind of it'll step its way up, kind of building a mountain in a way. If I'm like looking at the oscilloscope that's going on right now, it doesn't just go like high low high low high low. It kind of fluctuates up and bounces around and will bounce its way down. So moving to the next random voltage that's underneath the complex oscillator. So this has a lot of high-low. Listen to that. It's just, we'll kind of... It doesn't have as much mountain building as I would refer to it. It's just kind of lots of high-low. Now we'll go to the one under the modulation oscillator. So this is the most distinct one that I found. It's all weighted really high. So This could be good for if you want to add some random. I mean, what's cool about the easel is everything has attenuators on it, so you can add just a little bit. But if you want random, but you just you want very small fluctuations, this would be a good one. Where the other one, if you want very wide, like I want there to be no voltage and then a lot of voltage, you'd go for the one that's underneath the complex oscillator. And now we're on the last one, the one all the way to the left that's underneath the envelope generator. And this one reminds me a lot of the first one. It maybe has a little bit more, it still kind of fluctuates up and down, but it is kind of going high-low within those fluctuations, where maybe the first output has like 3 steps up, and then 3 steps down, and then a big step down, and then where this is kind of, its high lows are more drastic. So kind of good to know what you're getting instead of just picking a random output, which is good. But with the shorting bars, in using it with the 208, you kind of get set on like, I'm going to put random into the modulation section on the modulation oscillator. Well, we just saw that has a lot of it just hovers in one kind of small zone and does very little jumping, and you might want more drastic on-off kind of random going into the modulation section for that. Same with timbre. If maybe you don't want that kind of low high stuff, you just want little fluctuations, you might pull the random from the modulation oscillator, put it in the complex one, and then you kind of have working with a more narrow band of random. And then you have the ones at the sides that are pretty kind of equal overall. So I find this very helpful. All right, so I have something to confess. I am in love with amplitude modulation, especially on the music easel. So when you're in love, you don't want to part with amplitude modulation. Yet there's the very fun FM right below it. But what the solution I found for this is the sneaky little mod CV out in the top right hand corner in the mixer section. That takes the modulation oscillator's signal and puts it in banana jack form, so then you can use it elsewhere in the system. So actually, first let's just hear some AM. So I'll turn up the complex oscillator. It's just square right now, and the modulation oscillator is on the square as well. So we'll bring up some modulation. Listen to that. Let's change the pitch a little bit. That's fantastic. So what we can do is take that modulation CV out, banana jack, and we can get basically frequency modulation by putting it into the pitch input of the complex oscillator. So we will bring that up just clean, and now we've got a form of FM. We can then bring that AM back in as well to get it double modulated. What's cool is there's the polarity switch on the complex oscillator. So that's in the positive right now. We could flip it over to the negative and have the CV kind of push the pitch down. So let's try that out. That's pretty cool. So that's just with the FM by itself. I can bring that AM back into. So yeah, that's sounding pretty great. But we don't have to stop there. Like on the 259 programmable complex waveform generator, there is in the modulation index section that's in the middle of the dual oscillator, you have a bunch of switches that you can then turn on the amplitude modulation, the pitch modulation, but it also has a timbre modulation. So it's just routing the modulation oscillator to those settings. So we've got a timbre circuit here. So we could take the complex oscillator, turn down the square wave section, and just bring it all the way down to a sine. So then we can use the timbre section, and then we can piggyback off that same modulation oscillator CV out and put it in there. Actually, let's start out by just giving you just the timbre by itself. So this is just a regular timbre sweep. So that's just the offset I'm turning up and down. And now I'll turn up the CV input with the modulation oscillator in there. So yeah, a bit more movement, and then if I change notes, we're going to get different types of movement there too. I don't know if I really mentioned, I have the 218, the keyboard going to both of the oscillators, and they're kind of tuned relative to each other, so you're getting somewhat harmonic outcomes. So yeah, we've got that going to timbre. We can then go back to pitch, and we can bring up the amplitude modulation again. Yeah, it's just a thick, scuzzy bundle of modulation. So yeah, all that to say, don't sleep on the modulation CV out. All right. So we're going to talk about a CV feedback patch that I have going on here. It involves the three main sections, CV sections of the 208, the sequential voltage source, the envelope generator, and the pulsar. And everything is kind of interconnected. So to start off with the pulsar, we have that set to self-cycling mode. And so that is then triggering the sequential voltage source, and then the envelope generator is reading the sequential voltage source switches to fire off its envelopes. But what I have patched on the below in the patch bay is the envelope is going to go into the input of the pulsar. So the shape of the envelope is going to then speed up the pulsar, which will then speed up the sequential voltage source going through its sequences, and depending on what switches I have up, will then go back and trigger the envelope. So it all kind of mingles and works together or against one another, as we'll find out. So I have the envelope going to the low pass gate 1 and the pulsar going to low pass gate 2. You kind of are able to get a lot of different types of rhythms out of this. It's kind of the main point of it. So just to bring up the pulsar, so I have no switches switched up on the sequential voltage source, so there's no envelope taking place. But I am going to do that. I basically just have a 1 second decay envelope set up, and I've got a little bit of influence going into the from the envelope going into the pulsar. So I'll flip up stage 1, and so yeah, every first stage, which I'll bring up the envelope on the low pass gate 1. So you see every envelope, it's pushing forward that pulsar to fire at a faster rate, and you get that, I don't know, maybe is that like a triplet rhythm? And so we can see if I extend the voltage, like the decay on this envelope, it gets a bit faster. But if I make it shorter, you don't have all those hits anymore. What I could do is flip up another switch on the sequential voltage source. So I'll flip up number 3. So that's a pretty kind of standard rhythm. I also, just to mention, I have it set to 4 stages right now. What I could do is up the influence onto the pulsar and see what happens. So it's speeding up. I can take out a switch. I can try 3 switches. That's pretty full on. Maybe I shorten the envelope. So I've got 1, 2, and 3 switches on the sequential voltage source. Same pretty short decay envelope, and more influence going into the sequencer. I'm going to put the sequencer pitch into the complex oscillator, so we just get a little bit of variation there. So let's try a different type of shape of envelope and maybe bring down the switches a bit. So I'm going to have more of an even attack decay envelope. So that's kind of ramping through. So yeah, I've brought the attack and decay down quite a bit. So it's like too much influence on this. I can try and bring down the influence. That's kind of neat. So yeah, I brought down the influence on the pulsar. But I can also kind of change the relationship. So the pulsar is at like a 0.2 rate. I can bring that way down, and I can turn up the influence quite a bit more. And let's see, we're about to get back to our first switch to see what happens. Yeah, so we're on like infinite mode right now. I'll turn that back, the influence a bit. So with this kind of setup, yeah, we can kind of tell we're kind of getting these random smatterings. I'll maybe push up the rate of the pulsar a bit, see what happens there. Now we're back into that mode. So let's try maybe bringing it down to 3 stages. I'm going to do a slower attack, and maybe I'll bring up 2 switches right now. So I have switch 1 and switch 3 triggering the envelope. Still a pretty slow pulsar, so I'm going to push that up a bit, see what happens. I'm going to bring back the influence a bit, so they're kind of more even. So now I've got a very short, just a decay envelope. It's on switches 1 and 3. I can do all 3. That's a pretty, standard rhythm. So maybe I'll bring, so that's just 1. There's 1, 2. I can up the influence, see what happens. Maybe open up the envelope a bit, and we can hear it speeding up. So we get this kind of slurry of envelopes. Maybe I can switch it back to 4. Maybe I'll go into 5 steps, and so I've got steps 1, 2, and 4 triggering that envelope. I can bring up just the offset of the complex oscillator on the gate 1, so you can hear more notes come through. So yeah, a lot of minor tweaks between the shape of the envelope, the offset speed of the pulsar, and the input. You can just kind of take it into different territories really quickly. Play around on the keyboard. We can try and maybe have the pulsar influence the timbre. So yeah, fun stuff. I spent a weekend a couple months ago just on this patch, and I don't know. I probably got about 30 minutes of fun exploration out of that and some good tunes. So yeah, try that out.